Hey everyone, my name is Jessica Moore, and this is my description of my language and literacy activity. I am a doctoral candidate, so this may be just a little bit longer than everyone else's, but just hang in there with me because I think it was a pretty cool lesson and I'm excited to talk with you guys about it. So the description of my activity was that I used data from our last benchmark and I implemented a new tool that they could use to figure out main idea and central idea, since that was one of our power standards that our students did pretty poorly on. My rationale for it was definitely those data scores on our last benchmark. So it's crazy. We're about to take another benchmark starting next week, but the benchmark that we took right before Christmas, I used that data and I looked at it and saw that RL 7.2, which is main idea and central idea, we only had 14% of all 7th graders score proficient and advanced on that standard. And when I looked at my specific students' data, none of them had actually fallen into that range of proficient. So I decided it was time to go back and kind of remediate that. Plus, I'm in constant communication with their teachers, and their teachers also asked if I could please do a mini lesson or some kind of remediation to help them with the standard, because it is one that is going to be heavily tested, and it is one that they definitely were not grasping. So what I was trying to achieve by implementing this lesson was I wanted to give my kids an opportunity to build confidence when it comes to this specific standard when they take their next benchmark, and then after that, of course, the state test. So I wanted to give them a different kind of tool to put in their toolbox that would help them to feel like when they see those questions on the test that they say, I know how to do this, I have a way that I can break this down and get a surefire answer and just be self-assured and confident whenever they see those. What would they learn? So again, it would be that tool that they can apply whenever they are going to see those specific RIRL 7.2 questions on the test. So the way that this method works is they take each sentence in the paragraph and they sort it out to an answer choice that it matches with, and then whichever answer choice has the most sentences that pair with it, that is going to be their answer choice. So for my kids who definitely just weren't grasping it at all, I wanted to give them a new way to try it, since what they already were doing wasn't working very well. And then for my kids who kind of get it but still just aren't so confident, I wanted to give them a way that they could break down the paragraph and say, I know for sure this is my answer choice because I did this method and this is what I came up with. Their age range, so I actually teach 7th and 8th grade resource. So the kids that I work with are a little bit older than the ones, that we typically read about in our workbook and different things like that. But I did speak with our professor prior to this assignment, and I asked if I could please do it with my 7th graders because some of them are around age 12. But the age range of all the students I teach are anywhere from 12 to 16. I have one that's about to turn 17. So because I work with student and resource, a lot of my kids have failed multiple times. I have very, very few students who are actually on, their original grade level. I have students who are trying to catch up to their grade level, but I have a lot of kids who have really fallen behind. The classes that I did this with, I only did it with my 7th grade classes, and that would be, they range from about 12 to 14. I don't think I have anyone that's turned 15 yet, but most of them, are in that age range. The materials that you would need for this implementation of this project would be, there's 2 different ways you could do it. If you're one-to-one and you have computers for every student, thankfully our district is. So we did a lot of this on the computer. So you would need internet access. You would be needing some kind of access to some kind of technology. And also we have dry erase boards in our classroom. So I don't have desk. And that was not really a decision that I made. It's just whenever I came into this position a couple of years ago, all I had were these 3 dry erase, like kidney kind of shaped desks, and they told me that was what I'd be using. And I really love it. I think it's a great way for the kids to be interactive, for them to see what they're doing when they're working things out. And it's also a good way for me to come alongside them and jot out everything that I'm trying to help them remember, or everything that I want them to know, as we're working. So I love having those desks, and I think that they were really beneficial. But also, if you don't have those, you could just use paper and a pencil. The only other thing that we did was when we used our computers, our task cards were actually on Google Classroom. However, again, if you didn't have internet access or you weren't one-to-one, you could always just print out those task cards and it would be pretty much the same thing. we don't do everything on the computer because I know that some of my kids learn best whenever they have, you know, an actual tangible piece of paper to work on. And often my kids will say, Miss Moore, can we please do this on paper, or can we do this on paper? And usually my rationale for that is no, because whenever you take the state test, you are not going to get to do it on paper. So I would say we do probably 35% of our working class on paper, maybe a little bit more, but I try to keep a lot of it on the computer if they're not working out something on their tabletops. So those are the materials that you would need. So the implementation of this lesson, the way that I started it was I had all my kids come into the classroom, and their bell ringer was for them to start kind of brainstorming what they already knew about main idea and central idea. And then when the bell rang, I asked for them to take a few minutes and jot down the things that they knew with their partner. So they sit, most tables are 3 to a table, some are just 2, so I have 3 tables. So in that specific class, I had 2 groups of 2 and 1 group of 3. And I asked them to please jot down across their table with their dry erase markers some things that they remember about main idea and central idea. Tell me what it is. How do you find it? Do you struggle with it? Yes or no? And then I asked them to write out an example of a main idea and then to draw me just a small illustration because they absolutely love drawing with the dry erase markers all over the desk. And I always have to tell them, these are not cheap. Let's try to just conserve our ink. But also at the same time, if it's something like this, I'm fine with them expressing themselves creatively. And it was really fun to see the things that they came up with. One of mine wrote an example of like the central idea being like that Takis are their favorite chip. And then they drew this little Taki bag and they were eating Takis. And so it was really fun to see that. So that was how I opened the lesson. I just allowed them to kind of tap into their background knowledge, what they already knew, and kind of get that up to the forefront and just have a visual image of it on their desk. And then I did a mini lesson on main idea and central idea. And so for my mini lesson, I just asked them a couple of questions. I asked them, okay, what is central idea and what is main idea? And I allowed a couple of students to answer, and then I asked them, how do we find it? So they gave me their feedback and kind of told me how they found central idea, and the majority of them just said, we read through the passage and whatever it seems like it's the most about, then that's what it must be about. So again, that kind of just reassured me that they needed a more foolproof way of finding what the main idea and central idea was of the passage. So I pulled up on our projector, I pulled up our task cards and I went to the first card and we read through the card, and then they just kind of took a few guesses, and then I said, okay, you know, this is definitely a way that for some of you it just clicks. You read the card and you think, okay, I get it. This is what every single sentence can connect back to. But for some of you, you need to have a method of sorting things out so that you can more, you know, logically come up with this is what it must be because I see where it matches up. So the way that I began to show them was we sorted out A, B, C, and D as our answer choices, and then we went sentence by sentence in the paragraph, and we gave a tally mark to either one of the answer choices whenever a sentence matched with that or supported the claim. So anytime that we saw like maybe one of our cards was about a specific kind of Arctic fox, so it was saying that the Arctic fox lives in a certain kind of habitat. So anytime that a sentence matched up with that correct answer choice, we would put a tally mark beside it. But of course, there's so many distractors. So if it would ask something like, if it said that an answer choice was that the Arctic fox is white, then of course it is, and that is part of the environment that it lives in. It lives in a snowy environment, but that is not telling us specifically about the kind of environment that it lives in. So we went through and for every single sentence in the paragraph, whichever answer choice we thought it matched best with, we would put a tally beside that answer choice, and then at the end, whichever answer choice had the most tallies beside it had to be our answer. So there were definitely some tricky parts where the kids would say, this goes with this and this, it goes with A and C, and I would tell them, mark A and C, mark A and mark C. It's okay if you think it's both, because almost every single time, in the end, even if they marked multiple ones, it would turn out to where the one that was supposed to be the right answer ended up being the right answer. So after we did that, I went through, I think, 3 cards with them, and we did it together. We went through every single sentence, and we learned how to sort them out, and then we learned how to do tally marks, and we learned how to look at the end and say this one has the most, and then I told them if at any point you get to the end and you think that's not what I thought it was, then relook at your sentences and go through and tally them up again, because you might have gotten some wrong. So they did the rest of them on their own. I had them pull up the rest of the cards on Google Classroom. And there were 30 cards, but I did not tell them a certain number that they had to get to. I encouraged them to work to about card 18. So that would mean that they would have about 40 minutes to do 15 cards with their partner. So I did allow them to work with a partner since it's a new method and maybe some had gotten it and some hadn't gotten it as well yet. So they worked in their teams and they did the next 18, hopefully, or did 2 card 18 hopefully on their own independently in their groups without my help. So I did while they were working. I walked around and I looked to see how things were going. Every now and then a kid would raise their hand and say, Miss Moore, this one doesn't really seem to match with anyone. I don't get it. Can you help me? And we would kind of talk through it using some guided questioning and help them figure out which one deserved the tally beside it. The majority of my kids got it. They liked it. I had one tell me that it was kind of like a puzzle. They were like, it's like every sentence has a place. You just have to know where to put the puzzle piece. And I was like, absolutely. And then another kid told me that he really liked it. It felt like an escape room. And I was like, that's a great theory. I'm glad that you like it. So once we made it through, as many as we could by the end of the day, I just asked the kids for kind of an informal check, which I did use as I was walking around. I assessed how well they were doing, and then also I used the cards that they turned in to see how well they were doing, and they were doing really, really well. I was really proud of them. But at the end, I asked them to just kind of give me an informal check as our closure, and I said, all right, if our lesson today helped you, if it gave you another tool to feel more confident about how to identify main idea or central idea, or if you just, you already felt good, give me a thumbs up. And then I said, if you are still kind of unsure, but you're feeling better than you were before we came into class today, give me a thumb sideways. And then if you just still absolutely don't get it and the method today helped you literally none, give me a thumbs down. And all of my kids gave me a thumbs up. So, and I think that they're pretty honest. They will usually tell me if they don't get something or if they don't like something or if they wish something was a different way. So I do think it was helpful for them just to have a more strategical way to find main idea and central idea, because it always seems to them so subjective and it doesn't have to be. The differentiation and the intervention and accommodations all kind of roll into this class already being what it is. So I know that my kids already struggle. They're in my class because they need accommodations. And so for accommodations specifically, I did not set a certain place that they had to finish in a certain amount of time, especially because when we test, they get the whole day to test. They've never taken that long. But they are not rushed to test, and so I didn't want them to feel rushed to get through these cards, especially since it was a new method. So I encouraged them to make it to card 18, and the kids who did make it to 18, I encouraged them to try and push to 30 to make it to that very last card. And I did have some who actually made it to the very end. And of course I had some that, were just finishing card 18 when the bell was ringing, but I was proud of them for trying and doing as much as they could. Differentiation, I think that I did my best to incorporate a couple of different ways of reaching out to my students. I know that they love to write on those tables, so anytime we whip out the expo markers, which is when we do math, we always have them out, but we don't always have them out for ELA. So involving them in the ELA process was a lot of fun for them, giving them an opportunity to kind of create their own main idea and central idea. They really enjoyed doing that with the illustrations. We did we did group work, we did whole group work, we did partnered work. So I tried to appeal to my students who prefer whole group. I tried to appeal to my students who enjoy small group. I would say none of the kids in that class at all prefer to work independently. They all like to work with someone. Even my stronger students like to work with their table mate because it gives them an opportunity to kind of teach the lesson as well, which is really good for them. Then intervention, the whole thing was an intervention. So, we knew that this was something that they were struggling with. For those who I felt, not in this class specifically that I wrote the paper about, but in other classes, I did have a student or two who was like, I just literally don't get this method. It doesn't make sense to me. So I sat down with them, just the two of us together, and I allowed their partner continue to work, and I would kind of show them the steps again, and we would just kind of talk through it and talk about how we process it and how we figure out what matches with which one. And it seemed to go a little bit better when they had me right there matching sentences with them. My reflection of this is probably more positive than negative. I know, like I said earlier, a lot of times my kids will say, Miss Moore, do we have to do this? And I'm like, yeah, you're at school. You have to do this, you know. But I always make sure that I have a reason for why we have to do it. So I never just tell my kids, like, because I said so, because I do want them to be able to apply this to real world experiences and to understand why I'm asking them to do the things that they're doing. So my reflection was that it was a much more positive experience than even I thought it would be. You know, the kids saying like, oh, this is like a escape room, or this is like a puzzle, you have to put the pieces together, I think really built a, you know, a positive, more engaging environment for the other students in the class who maybe at first were kind of a little unsure. But I think anytime that a student like that just kind of shows any kind of passion or excitement, it kind of riles other students up and gets them ready to participate as well. The one thing I wish I had done differently, and I know that the reason why I did this was because I wanted them to have an opportunity to use our expo markers because they love to do that, but I wish I had had them do that on a sheet of paper, and so that they would have had that to take with them, so they would have had their original understanding of main idea and central idea, their illustrations, and then after that they could have added, you know, the steps on how to do the method that I taught in class, and then they could have kept that with them just to have as kind of a reminder whenever they come up on an activity like that again. So that's the one thing I really wish I had done different. I think it would have been good for them to be able to keep that paper with them, but overall I did feel like it went really well. We will find out, I guess, because my kids have a benchmark on Tuesday. So their ELA multiple choice benchmark is Tuesday, and we'll see how well they do. I'm really hoping to see some improvement. But Monday, I am going to remind them of our method, and we're going to practice with it one last time before they take the test. So I hope that this was helpful. Thank you guys for sticking with me and watching my video. Maybe this is something that you can implement in your class, even though it was a middle school classroom. I know maybe you could do it kind of differently. I know that there are probably a lot of different sorting activities that you can do with your elementary classes. So thanks for watching. I hope you guys have a great day.